On se souvient des 10 d'Hollywood, le document de John Berry sur les victimes de la chasse aux sorcières. Le dernier visage est celui d'Dmytryk. Dmytryk est le réalisateur de Murder My Sweet, Ouragan sur le Ken, Le bal des maudits, L'homme au colt d'or. Comme les autres scénaristes et cinéastes mis en cause par le sénateur McCarthy, Dmytryk connut la prison, mais en sortit blanchi après avoir coopéré avec la commission des activités anti-américaines. Avant son procès, il était le cinéaste le plus en vue du studio RKO, pour lequel il avait réalisé son chef-d'œuvre, Crossfire, en 1947.
This film studio considered Dmytryk's services invaluable. His films were successful and celebrated. Do you remember Crossfire? Edward Dmytryk, 41 years old, motion picture director. These films and many others were directed by Edward Dmytryk. As a reward for his distinguished contribution to world films, 1 year in prison.
At the time when you did one of your best and one of your most successful film at RKO, Crossfire, right after you were out the door, you were fired. How did you feel about this? I mean, you know, coming out with one of your best success and then just being on your...
Well, I don't think the two events were related in any way. I know that things have been made of that. They've said that that was one of the reasons because we made the first picture about anti-Semitism and the right wing didn't approve of that. That's not true at all. It just happened that the two things more or less coincided. I had made the picture that year and the congressional hearings came up, but they had been planning the congressional hearings for years, long before they knew I was going to make a picture like Crossfire or something. So there was no real connection between those two things at all. Obviously, the thing was, you know, it was a terrible blow to me. But at first, we felt so confident that...
You knew it was coming for a long time?
No, I didn't. It took me completely by surprise. It took me completely. There'd been a little talk about it, but we didn't know who was going to get subpoenaed and who wasn't. And when the subpoenas finally came, I didn't know that I was considered one of the group. I had been a communist, but I was no longer a communist at that time. And I really was taken by surprise.
When you came out of prison and you were blacklisted, who helped you out? You know, who
Nobody. I had to help myself. That's all. I could have, and it was obviously it was a very difficult decision to make, because I was looking over doing some work and looking over some papers the other day. I had telegrams from J. Arthur Rank and others saying, "Come on over to England. We're waiting for you." And I could have gone over like Joe Losey or Wilson or Ben Barsman or somebody else. I chose not to. I said, you know, my wife is American. My kids are. I had only one at that time. No, and the second was born at the end of that time. And I said, this is where I want to make films. So I had to, as they say, purge myself, which was not difficult for me to do because I was completely, you know, disillusioned about everything else. And that's all. And then I started out by making a little tiny film for the King brothers for $5,000, you know, just to prove that I could go ahead and that the American audience wouldn't boycott me.
How about guys like Harry Cohn, who... You know...
Harry Cohn wanted to hire me. He wanted to say to hell with all the others. And just at that time, I don't even want to talk about it, because something came up that threw me back in the papers again on the side of the Hollywood 10, and Cohn said, that's it, goodbye. And he would have taken the chance, because he didn't give a damn.
Well, because you made pictures that made money, so he didn't give a damn.
Well, it wasn't just that. I think he was an honest man. I don't think it was just because of the profit motive. I think that he thought it was basically un-American, as others did. But they were just afraid. They were railroaded by people like the heads of like Louis B. Mayer and all the others, and Jack Warner, who was scared to death. You know, later on, even after I got out to where I made pictures, somebody suggested me for a picture there, and Jack Warner said, over my dead body, you'll never make a picture at Warner Brothers, and I never did. It's about the only studio I never worked at. I couldn't work for a left-winger because I was a fink, you know, a renegade. I couldn't work for the right-wingers because they said, once a communist, always a communist. And there were a few, thank God, I had a pretty fat career in spite of that. I'm very grateful for that. But there were great problems. There's no doubt about it, always. There were times that, you know, you'd be met by my agent would be met by a wall. Nobody would say why. Nobody dares admit that they don't want you because of political reasons or something like that. So there were all kinds of things. There were things like if I had a good picture like Cane Mutiny that was up for Academy Awards, I never got nominated because they got on the telephone. Ward Bond and Marshall and had a Hopper and all that, and they told us that. They called everybody and said, don't vote for Dmytryk, don't vote for Dmytryk. I had several pictures that were up for awards, but I only got a nomination for one, and that was Crossfire, and that was before everything happened.
Budget serré, mise en scène nerveuse, lumière contrastée, c'est dans Crossfire qu'apparaît le mieux le style RKO de l'époque. À tel point qu'on avait surnommé Edward Dmytryk Monsieur RKO. Il s'explique aujourd'hui sur tout cela avec une sacrée pêche pour ses 75 ans.
That particular studio at that particular time, because they didn't have as much money as the other studios, and they had gotten, you know, a studio gets off in a certain kind of a genre and it succeeds, and then they can go out and sell on that. MGM always had, the girls were always beautiful. You know, they could be out for 48 hours, but when you saw them, they had, every hair was in place, and they could be in a shipwreck, and they had to look as though they just walked out of a beauty shop. Secretary who was making $18 a week lived in a $2,000 a week apartment. At RKO, we could do, that's the other thing about those kind of films, that's why that, you know, the old detective stories, the kind that you did in Europe and the kind that Agatha Christie did and everything, were always in the upper classes, weren't they? It was somebody rich getting knocked off, or Lord so-and-so, or Lady so-and-so. The butler, you know, they had butlers and servants, all that. This was the first time we did it with dirty people, common people. They might be mixed up with some rich people, but they were mixed up. So we could get into areas that we couldn't have gotten into with other people. I couldn't have made pictures about the ghetto in those days. Very difficult. But you do a mystery story, boy, you can go right down to the ghetto and they think it's wonderful. So it was one way of attacking a different kind of a social strata, which we normally couldn't attack. We spent half our time trying to outwit the studio executives and making the kind of thing that, you know, that they normally would say no to. That's number one. Number two, the reason we do it is that kind of lighting, that contrasty lighting, is much quicker than the old lighting was. In the old lighting, a cameraman would light everything in the set, and if there was a little sconce back there, he would light the sconce as though he were lighting a person, you know, give it its own three-point lighting and everything. In this, all we did was, you know, a couple of big shadows on the wall, light the character, and you're lit. And this is what I tried to do, again, to make films. Normally, we found that in Hollywood, they spend about 80% of their time moving, setting up cameras, lighting and all that, and maybe 10, 15% working with the actors. I wanted to spend 80% of my time working with the actors. The actors are my co-creators. A good actor will sometimes have some wonderful ideas, so I like to use them. Most students think that directors are little Hitlers. You know, they're dictators who say, move here, move here, move here, say it this way, say it that way. I had a teacher ask me, how do you get an actor to read a line the way you want it? And I said, I don't. Do you think that I would tell Spencer Tracy or Humphrey Bogart how to read a line? That's his business. He knows a hell of a lot more about reading a line than I do. And I expect him to do it in such a way, to play it in such a way that I'm surprised and I say, oh, how wonderful. I never imagined it was going to be that good. And now, that doesn't mean that they can't make a mistake. In the first place, there are two things. There are tremendous misconceptions about casting. It was wonderful when we had the stars. For instance, if I had a Clark Gable, and I made a picture with Clark Gable, I didn't have to convince the audience that the girl was going to fall in love with him. My problem was to convince the audience that she didn't fall in love with him immediately, you know, to set up obstacles so that she didn't fall in love with him until the end of the picture. But they worked for you. The stars all worked for you, and you could look at them, and you could, instead of having to establish all kinds of things, this is a kind of a man it is, this is a kind of a woman it is, you just put them up on the screen and they're there, and you could go on with your story and the development of character rather than the establishment of character. And the development of character is much more exciting, as you know. But to get back to the working with actors, one of the things I do is, as I say, unlike some, you know, Hitchcock is supposed to have said one time, actors are all puppets. I think he was kidding, because I don't think he believed that. He got the best actors he could find. You know, he got the Jimmy Stewarts and the best actors he could get. They're your fellow, for me, they're the most important creators next to me on the set. And I expect them to be. I work with them, and I want their ideas. And if they have, like, Marlon Brando is very creative. You've got to keep very tight control of him, because he can go way off over there, as he has on some pictures. Montgomery Clift, very creative actor, different than Marlon, because if Marlon got an idea, he would, you know, stay with it, and you sometimes had a difficult time getting him out of it. If Monty had an idea, he'd say, how about such and such and such a thing? And I say, no, Monty, I don't think so. He said, okay, forget it. I say, oh, wait a minute, let's discuss it. Maybe there's something. No, if you have the slightest doubt, we'll come up with something else. And so if you give them that kind of thing, if you let them know, everybody has an ego. An actor doesn't like to be a puppet doing your thing. And if you let him think and know that he is a creator along with you, without him, and you can't have a picture, because when you put it in that theater, all that counts as far as the audience is concerned are those people up there. Not the actors, but the human beings that you're seeing on the screen. They don't know how much time went into it, and how long it took you to prepare it, and how many millions of dollars it cost, and how much trouble the cameraman had photographing it or anything. They don't know anything about that. All they know is that there are human beings up there. So if you don't recognize your actors as the prime you know, people in the thing, and one of your co-creators, you're just cutting your own throat for your own ego.
Are you at ease with big budgets?
Very much at ease, yeah. That doesn't bother me. The only thing is, what does bother me is, because those kind of pictures, and I did a couple of others like that took about 125, 150 days to make. And by that time, if you make a picture that goes more than 40 days, you're in serious trouble, because everybody gets paranoid. Everybody. You start thinking everybody hates you, and that, you know, everybody's out to get you. Everybody does. It's the tension on filmmaking is the hardest work in the world, and the worst in some ways. And the tension gets so great that it is very, very difficult to work, and I have to keep reminding myself, you know, I'm not paranoid, that people don't hate me. This is just because I've been working so long and I'm so goddamn tired. You know, that's what makes me feel that way. I'm wrung out. When I finished a picture, I couldn't read a newspaper for a month or two. I couldn't do anything. My mind would just go absolutely dead. I could never talk about another film or do anything. Just had to rest.
You haven't made a film since 1975, I think?
Something like that. I don't know. It's been about 10 years.
Why?
I haven't found a good film to make. And frankly, they haven't been showering them at me. You know, they haven't been coming to me. Not with good films. I get scripts. I still get scripts. I had one situation where for instance, Sammy Davis Jr. wanted me to make a picture with him. It's kind of an interesting story. And had a chance to get some money from a famous insurance executive in Chicago who was very, very rich. So we went there. We flew there. We didn't see the financier, but we saw his accountant and his lawyer. And had a script with me. And the lawyer said, I think it was a lawyer, you know, well, if you give me the script, I'll have my wife read it. And I said, your wife, is she a film producer or anything? And he said, oh, no, but she knows about these kind of, you know, in America, it's the little woman who is the artist. The man doesn't know anything about these, because art is a sissy thing. And the little woman is the one. Well, I picked up the script and I said to the guy, come on, let's go. You know, it was just silly. I'm not going to have a lawyer's wife in Chicago who may have been in a high school play or something tell me whether the script was good or not. He should have asked me. I'm the expert. I'm the guy with the record. I'm the guy with the background. He should have said to me, do you think it's a good story? And then banked on my reputation and my knowledge, not on his wife's. So but this is what has happened lately.